Welcome to Live Your Balance, a podcast for busy humans who are curious about taking a step back from overwhelm so that they can create more balance in their lives. Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of the Live Your Balance podcast. How are we this week, love? I, for one, can't believe that we're at episode 5 already. It has gone so quick. I appreciate we put 3 episodes out all at one time, but we're at episode 5 and I've got a good one in store for you today. But before we dive into that, let's just have a catch up. How has your week been? What's been going on? I think this week for me, it's been a good week. It's been a week that I have really enjoyed in many, many ways. I think partially because it's a long weekend. I am recording this on the bank holiday weekend, and so I have 4 days away from work, which is really, really nice. And I feel really, really lucky that I get that as a key worker as well, because I know that there are many key workers who won't be having time off over the bank holiday. So I'm very, very grateful that I have this time and space, and I think this time and space is really, really beneficial for me right now. But I think it's a week where many people have been starting to feel a bit more fed up with self-isolation. And I think this is something that I'm experiencing maybe more so because of what I'm doing at work. I'm getting in touch with people, our clients, and checking in with them. And I work with older adults, and the majority of them are now saying that they're starting to get a bit fed up and a bit bored of this whole isolation malarkey. And that's totally understandable. You know, I think there's a novelty aspect to it, isn't there? Where at first it's like, oh, let's work from home and this feels really good and I can do what I want when I want at home and I can work in my pajamas. But there comes a point where it all gets a bit boring, and when we start to really notice the lack of certain activities in our lives, that can have a really big knock-on effect on how we feel about ourselves, about the world around us, and that's really hard. Like, that's understandably really hard. One thing that I've definitely noticed is that I have really been relishing the fact that I don't feel any pressure to have to go out and do anything. And I think this is a productive pressure that I hadn't even really particularly noticed or consciously been aware of, but I definitely have now been able to take a step back and notice that most weekends I feel this urge to go out and be productive and do things and do shopping and run errands and do tasks. And do you know what? I am not missing that at all. I am relishing this opportunity to not have to feel that pressure, and that has been really, really enjoyable. And I have been finding quite a lot of pleasure in just staying at home and doing my thing and getting out for my walks and enjoying nature. I know that not everybody might be experiencing isolation in the same way, and I have some advantage in that I am actually getting out of the house every day because I'm going out to work, but I really am enjoying this step back that I feel I've been able to take from that. And this is something that I'm definitely going to be reflecting on and trying to take forward when things start to pick up again, because I've not missed going out and doing those things. And I don't actually feel like my life is lacking in any way, shape or form because I don't have that. And actually, I think this space is causing me to make more conscious choices, particularly around spending money. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but when I go out and run these errands, I have a tendency to buy things that I maybe don't need. I live in a town centre, so Greggs is literally a stone's throw away from my front door. And I don't know about anybody else, but I can't walk past Greggs without getting a sausage roll or a steak bake, the vegan versions, of course. But I'm not missing that at all. And I think this is going to cause me to be much more consciously aware about my choices, I hope, when things do start back up again and things reopen and I start to kind of integrate back into the world a little bit more. But that's just a reflection that I wanted to share with you. Maybe you've noticed similar, maybe you haven't. Let me know and we can continue that conversation over on my social media channels, which are linked down below. Anyway, enough chatter. I think we should get into how does she do it. Welcome to How Does She Do It, the part of the show where we dive into finding out how our wonderful guest creates and lives her most balanced life. Each guest will answer the same 7 questions each and every week so you can get a really great idea about how she does it, how she creates and lives her balance. Today's guest for How Does She Do It is the lovely Rachel from Veil and Verse. I will let her introduce herself, but Rachel is definitely one of those women who I look at and I genuinely think, how does she do it? And that is what this segment is all about. It's all about us collectively sharing how we get through, how we manage all the things that we've got to manage, how we live and create balance in this really busy world that we live in. One thing that I would also like to mention, because I saw Rachel share this week. Her interview was recorded a couple of weeks ago, but this week Rachel shared that she is going to be featured or is featured in British Vogue this month, which I think is just bloody amazing. And I am so happy and excited for her. It's such an achievement, especially given that her business is only a few months old. So I just wanted to share that with you all. If you feel called to, go and send her a virtual high five and some love, because I think that's such an amazing achievement and something to be really proud of. Anyway, without further ado, let's dive into how does she do it. Question 1. Who are you, what do you do, and how do you spend your time?
Hi, my name's Rachel and I am the owner of Veil and Verse. Veil and Verse is a bespoke poetry business and I specialise in weddings. So I create bespoke poetry for people's wedding ceremonies, speeches, vows, favours, gifts, any type of poem that you can think of that you can incorporate into a wedding. So that is my business that I run. It is just over 5 months old now, which is crazy because it feels like yesterday when I just started it. And the story behind it is that I started it because I'm planning my own wedding right now. And I'm also on maternity leave. So there's a lot going on in my life, running a business, planning a wedding, raising my baby girl, Willow, who is now 7 months old, which is crazy, time's flown by. So that's pretty much how I spend my days. There's a lot of balance going on in there.
Question 2. What do you feel like you're good at when it comes to managing your time, including making time to look after yourself?
So I think I'm quite good at putting my own health first. As much as I kind of work really hard, take care of Willow, keep the household running, cook healthy dinners, I always know when I need to stop and rest. And that is so key for me. If I don't have that time, even if it's literally just a half an hour bath where I ask my fiance to just look after Willow, I need to do that. And I listen to a podcast, I have a bath, I watch my favourite TV programme, which at the moment is called The Midwife. I'm a little bit obsessed and I'm so glad I'm just watching this after giving birth. Just a side note if anyone is thinking of watching it. So yeah, I think it's really important just to listen to your own body and not be afraid to ask people around you for help, especially if you've got children or a business or anything that you are committed to. The world does not stop if you stop. You can have that half an hour or 1 hour to yourself. That is absolutely fine and you should never feel guilty for that.
Question 3. What's your biggest challenge when it comes to balance?
My biggest challenge when it comes to balance is saying no and trying not to take on the world. I think I have such high expectations of myself and so many people could probably relate to this. You want to do everything. You want to get everything done all in one day. You create this massive to-do list. You set your expectations really high first thing in the morning. And then by lunchtime, you've probably achieved nothing because you're overwhelmed. I think balance is making sure that your to-do list is not just filled with work tasks and household chores and things that you have to do. It also needs to be filled with non-negotiable things that make you happy as well. So if you enjoy journaling or writing down something you're grateful for every day or having a hot cup of tea, that should be on your to-do list. That is going to help you reach your goals if you're a business owner or if you're a mum or a wife or any other role that you have in your life. Those things are going to help you find balance. You don't just have to kind of work yourself to the bone and not give yourself a break.
Question 4. What do you do to help you juggle everything that you need to juggle?
So, juggling everything I need to juggle is hard. As I mentioned before, I try not to set my expectations too high because when I first started out running my business, I had a 3-month-old baby. My time limits were short. I had to work in between nap times. I was often doing things on my phone while she was asleep on my chest. I was breastfeeding. So I was so limited in my time slot. So what I did was create a little list of things that I had to do every single day. But I didn't put a time limit on those. I think some people really like the time blocking technique, which allows you to put specific tasks into specific time slots in your day. And I worked with a business coach who's amazing, Holly, and she said, you know what, Rachel, this isn't going to work for you. You cannot expect yourself to be doing blogging every day at 10 a.m. because what if Willow needs you? So I juggle things by tackling morning to-dos and afternoon to-dos, and that is how I do it. I have things that I always do in the morning, which is mostly my creative stuff, because by the time the afternoon comes, I just want to be a mum and be a fiance and be Rachel who watches TV and cooks and goes for walks. So yeah, my mornings are mainly work, and that is my business hat that I wear, which is normally 5 a.m. till midday. And then the afternoons and evenings, I try to switch off as much as I can and do the things that make me happy and the things that help my family and myself.
Question 5. What's your go-to for when you feel overwhelmed?
So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I've got a lot better at this, but I used to really hold it all in and be really, really hard on myself, which I think is normal when you're a new mum and you just have a new business. There's so much going on in your head. It can be difficult to sleep. You're constantly kind of thinking, what can I do next? How can I get ahead? So that really did lead to a lot of feelings of overwhelm for me. So now how I manage this is I say to myself, all I have to do is be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday. So instead of comparing myself to other mums, to other wives, to other kids, and to other business owners who might have been doing it a lot longer than me, I just think, okay, so what have I done that's good today? And how can I commend myself for that? And what makes me better today than I was yesterday? And so that really grounds me and makes me grateful for what I've done. Even if it was just literally, okay, I had a shower, I got dressed, and I replied to an email. Okay, doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a huge goal that I've reached. Especially with a baby, there's some days where I don't even get that done. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I definitely just try and be kind to myself and think about what I can do tomorrow to do an even better job.
Question 6. What's one habit you do to look after yourself every day that's non-negotiable?
One habit that is non-negotiable. Oh, okay. So for me, I am an absolute lover of tea. Having my morning cup of tea on my own while everyone is still in bed in the house, so that's my fiance Stephen and my baby girl Willow, is like a game changer. I might get up super, super early, so I normally get up at about 5 o'clock, but that to me feels like a little bit of luxury, even though sometimes I'm like, oh, I really don't want to get up right now. as soon as that kettle boils and I have that hot cup of tea and I can literally enjoy it for just an hour or half an hour whenever Willow wakes up, I love that. And that will always be part of my daily routine. Even at the moment, I still do it on the weekends. A lot of people are like, oh, you get up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday, you must be crazy. And I'm like, I genuinely enjoy it. You can't stop me. Yes, there will be times when I have that cup of tea, I do a little bit of work and I just want to crawl back into bed. And sometimes that happens and I'm kind to myself and I allow it. But yeah, having that good morning cup of tea is my number one non-negotiable.
Question 7. What does creating a balanced life mean to you?
So to me, that means not giving yourself equally to everyone in your life, but striking a balance between all the important buckets that you have. So what I'm saying is you don't have to spread yourself kind of between all the things that you've got going on. So for me, it's wedding planning, being a mum, being a good fiance, being a good daughter, being a good sister, being a good best friend, being a good business owner. There's a lot going on. So instead of spreading myself thin and giving evenly to each thing, I try and have moments where I give a lot to one aspect of my life. So there might be a week where I'm just like, I need to just nail business stuff today. I need to crack on, reach my goals, get out there, blog, network, do all those things that are moving the needle forward for my business. And that is fine. And then the next week, I'll take a week just to kind of be with my family and spend time at home and not be on my laptop as much and close Instagram and just not go on it, which I know is really hard for people. So that might sound really weird and complicated, and I might not have explained that in a good way. But what I'm saying is you don't have to have balance every single day and every single week, because if you think about it as a whole, let's take a whole month or a whole year. If you look over the year, you will have had balance in every aspect of your life, but sometimes it's not possible to balance everything every single day. There might be a day where you can't be a good friend because you really have to focus on your family at that time. And that's okay, because you're going to be an amazing friend another time. And that will all even itself out. So it's all about being kind to yourself, finding your priorities for that day, for that week, or for that month, and then finding balance in other ways to bring up the levels that you might have missed out. So yeah, for me, creating a balanced life is all about prioritizing what is important to you in that moment, writing it down and having a plan of how you're going to make up the balance in those other areas. If you've had a really tough week working, how are you going to balance it out with a self-care week the next week? So I hope that makes sense. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you, Jordan, and I just think you're amazing. I think you are such an inspiration to all women out there, and seeing your face on Instagram just lights me up all the time. I love it. I wish you all the best, and I hope this was really helpful.
I want to extend a big thank you to Rachel for taking the time to share how she does it. And one thing that really shone out to me throughout Rachel's interview was this theme of being kind to yourself and then also moving things forward when needed. And although she didn't use this term, what I really picked up on there was how she uses self-compassion to help her create balance in her really busy life. I'm sure you'll agree that Rachel is juggling many different roles. Just a few of the ones that she mentioned are the role of being a mum, a partner and fiance, a business owner, a daughter, a friend. And it can be so easy to get caught up in being hard on yourself if you don't feel like you're showing up in the best way for those roles and relationships. And I loved how she said that she alters her priorities depending on what's going on in her life. And in these times, we'll go all in, knowing that there will come a time where she isn't able to be as all in, but that she lets that go and doesn't use it as a stick to beat herself with. Today, I thought we'd use this balanced chat to dive deeper into self-compassion, because not only is it a powerful tool for living a life that feels good, but I also think it is so valuable at the moment given the current global situation. So what is self-compassion? Self-compassion, in its essence, in a really simple definition, is applying the compassion that you would offer to another being to yourself. It's being a kind friend to yourself. Maybe you feel like this feels pretty self-explanatory, but I know that this isn't always the case. A few weeks ago, I ran a group on self-compassion at work. If you're not aware, I work as an occupational therapist in a day service for older adults who experience mental health difficulties. And when I started talking about what self-compassion is, many of the group members really struggled to wrap their head around the concept that you could actually focus on your needs and that it was about you and not just showing compassion to other people. And maybe that's a generational thing, I don't know. But it really got me thinking that maybe this topic isn't as obvious as it might initially seem. I do think there's a real difference in understanding what it means to be self-compassionate versus actually being self-compassionate. One is much easier than the other, I'm sure you'll agree. The former, the understanding self-compassion, definitely feels like an easier job than actually applying it. So let's start by looking at what compassion actually involves, because if we can understand compassion, then we can start to understand self-compassion. The word compassion comes from the Latin word compati, which means suffer with. The Oxford Dictionary defines compassion as sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings and misfortune of others. I'm not going to lie, when I was researching for this episode and I looked at this definition, I noticed an automatic recoil when I read it. I really don't like it. I really don't resonate with it. And honestly, I don't think it aligns at all with my view of compassion, particularly the use of the word pity. But there are other definitions that are floating around in the ether that include a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress and desire to alleviate it, which is from Merriam-Webster, and also a strong feeling of sympathy and sadness for the suffering or bad luck of others and a wish to help them, which is from the Cambridge Dictionary. I align much more with these definitions, particularly the first one, as both encompass the fact that compassion drives us to want to help. Although I'll caveat that being compassionate doesn't always have to mean that you jump in and physically help someone. I think true compassion also involves recognizing the humanness in the experience. As I've said before, humans are perfectly imperfect, and suffering, distress, failure, and imperfection are all part of being human. Compassion allows us to acknowledge that. Being human is hard. Living a human life is hard, and that is okay. So now we're going to move on to the tricky bit, and that is, how do we translate compassion into self-compassion? Because when we're applying compassion to ourselves, it can throw up so much stuff, said in inverted commas. Whether that's limiting beliefs about not being deserving, feeling like other people maybe deserve it more than you, or feeling like it's just too hard and too painful to show compassion to yourself. Now, Dr. Kristen Neff, who is a leading researcher in the area of self-compassion, highlights 3 elements of self-compassion, which I wanted to take a moment to explore further. The first element of self-compassion is self-kindness over self-judgment. That is that we respond to ourselves with warmth and understanding in moments of difficulty or suffering or failure, rather than criticizing and judging ourselves for something that is a natural part of the human experience. These experiences are inevitable. Nobody gets through life unscathed of difficulty. And honestly, when did criticizing and berating yourself for being less than perfect actually help in that moment? I don't know about you, but I don't think that I've ever experienced a time when criticizing myself has been particularly helpful, when I've been feeling real pain and sadness and discomfort in the moment. Self-compassion can actually help in reducing our suffering in these moments, because resistance amplifies suffering, whereas if we can accept our situation with kindness and understanding, we have an opportunity to reduce our own suffering in that moment. The second element of self-compassion is common humanity over isolation. Breaking that down, that means that all humans suffer. We can often get so caught up in our own experience that we end up believing that we're the only person that experiences pain or failure or making mistakes, when the reality is actually very different. The reality is that we're all sharing in this because we're all perfectly imperfect humans. I think this is especially pertinent right now, given that we're in forced isolation, and self-compassion can really help to remind us that we're not alone in this. The third element of self-compassion is mindfulness over identification. This one threw me off a little bit initially, but let me break it down for you. So self-compassion requires balance when it comes to our emotions. Sometimes we might suppress our emotions and other times we might exaggerate them, particularly when it comes to what you might consider to be negative emotions. These are in air quotes because negative is a judgment and emotions aren't good or bad. But this balance in how we view our emotions helps us consider perspective, and it allows us to observe our experience mindfully by being non-judgmental, open, and becoming an observer rather than trying to suppress or deny our emotions. This allows us to experience them and feel compassion whilst also not getting caught up in the narrative of the thoughts and feelings and then ending up in a downward spiral, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. I think it's also really important to know, and this is something that I've seen come up a few times in recent weeks, the notion that I shouldn't be feeling X, Y, or Z because there's people worse off than me. I want to remind you that pain is pain, regardless of the situation or cause. Your pain is valid, as is everybody else's pain. Bringing mindfulness into it allows us to view the situation more objectively and see it for what it is, rather than what we think it should be. I think it might be helpful to also really briefly touch on what self-compassion isn't, because it might be easy to get drawn into thinking that self-compassion is egocentric and selfish and about only being concerned for your own feelings and needs, or maybe even letting yourself off the hook all of the time in the name of self-compassion. And that isn't self-compassion. Self-compassion isn't self-pity, nor is it self-indulgence. Sometimes self-compassion might be being gentle with yourself, and sometimes self-compassion is giving yourself a kick up the butt to get moving and being your own biggest cheerleader while you're at it. Self-compassion also doesn't equate to self-esteem because, as we've said several times, true compassion comes from a place of believing that all humans deserve compassion, and they don't have to be good or talented or clever in order to be deserving of that. You are deserving of self-compassion. And the thing is, love, you have everything that you need inside of you to start on your journey to self-compassion. And you know why that is? Because I know that you have the ability to be compassionate to other beings. If you show kindness and understanding and warmth to any other creature on this earth, whether it be human or animal, then you have the skills that you need to start showing compassion to yourself. So how do we start doing that? Here are some ideas of ways that you might start bringing more self-compassion into your life. Firstly, practicing mindfulness. If you've followed me for a while on my social media, you will know that I talk about mindfulness a lot. Mindfulness is all about non-judgmental noticing. So whilst mindfulness itself might not start with compassion, it will help you start to notice and observe when you're not being particularly compassionate towards yourself. Another idea is to start reframing critical thoughts. When you notice critical thoughts coming up in a particular situation, can you reframe them in a more compassionate way? This doesn't mean that you need to create sunshine and rainbows in your thoughts. But say I noticed a critical thought of, "You're an idiot," when I did something wrong. A more compassionate response in that moment might be, "You're trying your best, let's work out what went wrong here." Not only is that more compassionate, but it's also way more productive than beating yourself with a stick and gives you a chance to reflect and learn and grow. Because remember, like I said, self-compassion isn't always being gentle on yourself. Sometimes you might have to give yourself a little bit of a motivational nudge to help you keep moving forward or learn from your mistakes or make changes for the future. A third idea that you could try is to give yourself time. If a friend said they were having an evening off to relax, would you criticize them for it? Probably not. You're probably more likely to acknowledge how helpful that would be for them and how much it would help them look after themselves. And if taking time is okay for them, then let me tell you, it is also okay for you too. A fourth idea for practicing self-compassion is to ask yourself, how would I treat a friend in this situation? Chances are we're all way more compassionate towards the people in our lives than we are to ourselves. And recognizing how we might respond to ourselves in a more compassionate way can feel really hard, especially if this is new to you and if self-compassion is a bit of a foreign concept that you've never really put into practice before. So if we start by removing ourselves from the equation and coming back to what we know, which is being compassionate to others, we can then take that and work out how we might then apply that compassion to ourselves. So next time you're in a pickle and aren't sure how to treat yourself in a compassionate way, ask yourself, how would I treat a friend if this was happening to them? A fifth and final idea for practicing more compassion in your life would be to practice a loving kindness meditation. Loving kindness meditations are all about cultivating love and kindness in the moment and then offering it to ourselves. You can also practice loving kindness as a means of offering love and kindness to other people, but actually, when it comes to self-compassion, this is all about focusing on offering it to us. A quick Google search will come up with multiple options for guided practices on YouTube or scripts that you can download. Not only that, but there's options available to you on the Headspace app if that's something that you subscribe to, or there's literally hundreds of guided loving kindness practices on Insight Timer, which is one of my favorite meditation apps because it's free and it has thousands and thousands and thousands of guided practices on there for you to access. I hope you find those tips and ideas helpful. Let me know if you take any away and put them into practice, and share with me what your favorite is. If you're already practicing self-compassion, then go you, keep going, you have got this, I really believe in you. If it's a new concept to you, then I really encourage you to start small and don't expect yourself to get it right the first time. Trying to take this stance is compassionate in itself, and please know that I completely believe in your ability to do this. A huge thank you again goes to Rachel for joining us today to share how she does it and for providing the inspiration for today's balanced discussion. And a little reminder for you all that there's still time to secure your space in both the Live Your Balance Collective, which is my brand new 6-week group coaching container. I'm looking for founding members and doors close on Sunday the 19th of April. And there's also time to still save your seat for the Align Your Balance Circle that I'm hosting next Sunday, also the 19th of April, with my beautiful friend and soul sister Jess. And actually, the day this podcast goes live is Jess's birthday, so I'm sending huge love and birthday wishes to her today. I will leave the links below with more information on the Live Your Balance Collective and the Align Your Balance Circle, but I can promise you that they're going to be pure fire and a surefire way to help you use this really upside down time as an opportunity to create and live more balance and feel damn good while you're doing it. If you would like more information, please click the links below. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this week's episode of the Live Your Balance podcast, and I really hope to see you back here soon. If you've enjoyed this episode of Live Your Balance, then please consider leaving a rating or review in whichever app you use to listen to your podcast. It's greatly appreciated and helps more people find the podcast so that more people can join us in living their balance too. That's all for today, so until next time, don't forget to keep living your balance.